Hi, David Taylor, or Mr Pelargonium as people like to call me. Today I'm going to talk about standards. Yeah, I haven't spoken about them for ages, so let's get going. Hi, well, it's very good to see you again. We're well into July now. I've just published, actually, in the last couple of days, the video on taking cuttings, which I thought would be helpful to you, and I've had good comments back already on those. So I thought I'd come bang up today. I did film that about just shortly after the show season, so I thought I'd sort of get in because I haven't spoken at all much recently about the standards, and that's something I need to address because what with the show season, the build up to show, I'm National Show Secretary as well, so a lot of work involved. And I haven't done a video about the standards for probably getting on for a couple of months, so we really do need to get up to date with that. In the meantime, a little footnote actually to the cuttings video. The important thing is I didn't state really how long they take. Now, zonal cuttings should root quite freely within about 3 weeks. So keep an eye out at the bottom of any little pot or whatever method you use to sink them into for little roots to start poking through, and then that's the time to move them on into a relatively smaller pot. Put them up into probably a 3.5-inch pot, such as these ones here that these miniatures are in, and that will be fine to last the plant for probably a couple of months. As we get into the autumn. It will of course depend on what you want to do with your cuttings in the longer term, whether you're going to overwinter them. Probably taking cuttings now you almost certainly would, so it's important to sort of keep moving them on up until the size of the pot that you want to end them up with. So that's a little final closing tip for the cuttings. Now, one of the things that I have been doing before we move on to the standards, I've been repotting my plants, and I'd done videos last summer. If you go back over the movies that I've done about a year ago when I was repotting my plants then, follow that if you want to see what I do. But I generally pull all my plants out. Here's a couple that I have done recently. They get pulled out, the roots get trimmed back, and they get repotted into a smaller pot or a similar size pot, depending on how much you cut the roots back. But if you do a real tough root cropping, you know, you can go into a smaller pot. So I've been doing that. One of the things that I've also been doing, because you'll look and see, well, the greenhouse is looking relatively sparse at the moment, is the fact that I have made the decision to get rid of a number of my old show plants. They really have given me good service. You'll see in the previous video to do with cuttings, the plant I had of Mrs May last, that has now been dumped. I decided to get rid of it. I got a really good number of cuttings off it, so it's done really good service over a number of years. Another plant, Gosbrook Susanna, named after my wife, that was actually 7 years old, and that really did get past it. So that one's gone. A number of others as well that have been giving me really good long service, but it's one of those things that I've got to do now that I've got a smaller glass house, and I'm bringing younger plants on to replace those for the next show season. So that's a little ditty on those. Okay, so let's have a look at these standards then. Now, you may remember I sort of disregarded a couple that were growing really quirky, and I ended up with 3. Now, these have actually grown on all during the sort of season, the last couple of months. During the show period, I've just been watering them, feeding them fairly steadily, and they have grown on quite well, actually. It's surprising. It's always one of those things that the plants you ignore are always the ones that do better for you. So that's a quirky scenario that a number of us exhibitors always do say. We've got some blooms. I've not been taking off the blooms, but really I don't want want blooms to come on these, so these are probably going to be taken off today. But I've got gorgeous blooms. These are all of a dwarf plant called dwarf stella, I should say, called Robin Louise. It's one that I sort of bred quite a number of years ago now, but it's got a lovely deep lilac bloom to it, and this has got a really large sort of head that's grown out the side there with other ones coming through. Now I've got decisions to make about what I'm going to do with these three. They've all more or less, there's one here, another one over the side there, and this one here. They've all more or less, they're all pretty straight. You can see if we sort of get up a bit closer, hopefully the camera can sort of home in or focus in on those. Now what we've got quite a good long stem, and this one's split at the top. It's split there, and that will be the head that I want to use for the standard. And the main stem, which is nice and straight, has just bent over slightly, so I'm going to tie that in. So I'll do that now and show you the result of me doing that. Let's just have a look at the others. I think they're more or less the same. So similar thing, it's just bent over slightly. This one may be able to go higher. I mean, there is no strict rule, as I think I've said before, on how high to have your standards. If you want them a bit lower, for instance, this one has got a number of side shoots growing out a bit further down, but I like my standards to be a little bit taller. So you could, if you wanted to, crop out, say, where I've got these other side shoots growing out here, about this level. I have got 2 or 3 side shoots that would make a head, but I've got the same going on further up, and I've got a nice straight stem, so I'm going to use the taller head version, if you like. Okay, so let's just have a look. Now, what I've got here, I've got a side shoot there, which is quite low. I'm going to quickly take that out. Again, there's some good cutting material coming here, but I don't really need it. So that's already revealed the stem. Now I've got quite a big side shoot coming out here. Strip the leaf off so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to take that one out as well. As I said, no strict rules on the height. I could actually, you know, use this point here as the top of the standard, but you know, there's brilliant cutting material there. But I'm going to dump them because I don't need any young plants of this version. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take this lovely bloom off, slice that there, it's quite a thick bloom. Now the other thing that I have done, of course, is ensure that the plant is on the dry side, as I've always said a number of times. So that now is just ready to be sort of strapped up there. Now I've got a decision to make really about whether I give this a stop, and I'm going to. And so I'm just in order for it to bush out at the top, because that's what I want to do now. I want this to bush out at the top. Stopping basically means that the head will split. I'm going to stop it below a little flower joint there. That's there. And on the other side, I might leave that one actually, and the reason is because the little growth point out of the top there is just not sort of split out, and I want that to split away so that I can stop it properly. I want this to balance, to get as high as this sort of top split stem here. It's just so that it equals the same height, and then I can begin to stop and shape, and that head will then circle round, you know, gradually in a perfect ball. So I want that little one to grow up a bit. So I've stopped the taller one, but I'll let the other little stem grow up to match it. I'm now going to just tie that in to straighten that up. When I've done it, we'll come back and I'll show you the final result. Right, okay, so there we are. I've just literally, all I've done is just literally pull that slight bend back over towards the stick that's in there, and that's just straightened that up. And you can see now that's nice and straight, but you can clearly see the split there just at the top, and that's the ideal, that's sort of spot on perfect. Don't worry about tying in and potentially just slightly marking the main stem, because over time this main stem will turn to wood and you will not notice any sort of slight tugging that this may cause on the green stem as it is at the moment. So don't worry about just forcing that in. When it's hard wood, which this will ultimately become if you want to keep them for a number of years, you know, you won't cause any problems at all with a little bit of a pulling mark initially there. Once it's set and sort of pulled in, been there several weeks, maybe a month or so, I'll perhaps relieve the stress and untie that and just put it down a bit further. But I'm not too concerned about getting any little marks on the what is currently green stem but will ultimately become a wooden stem. Right, well, I'm just cutting in with another. I've been doing this one, and this one's presented me with a little bit of a problem here. I've sort of gone up, I've taken a couple of side shoots out, and I've got a really long side shoot here, which is much longer than anything coming near it. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to cut this one a bit shorter, make a slightly shorter standard. I'm going to get rid of this side shoot whatever happens. This one is going to form the basis of my split that I want. Okay, and this long sort of side shoot, which I could have tied in to make a longer break, but the problem is there's no sort of decent breaks because there's too much bloom coming on it now. It's one of the problems with leaving things too long. Is just throwing lots of side shoots for bloom, and I don't really want to use that. So what I'm going to do, I've got a double split at the base of this stem. That means shoots, potential new stems coming both sides, as that way and underneath, which is even a bit longer. So I'm going to cut just above that, which is quite a hard cut back, and that little block there will form the new head. So this one is going to be a bit shorter. This stem, probably a bit shorter than I ideally like, but it'll be okay having something a bit different. So that's what I'm going to do with this one, and I'll show you after I've finished dealing with it. So what I did, I just split off there, I just cut that back. I've got a good break coming out there which I've stopped. I've just nicked out, which I think I showed you, but there's a nice little baby stem growing out the other side of that, so that'll form a nice break which will begin the process of making a nice ball head. And then just below it there's another split there that's got a new stem which I will let grow on to balance off with the other side. But that's still to grow. You can see it's probably a couple of centimetres along or so. So there we are, and that's nice and straight as well. Right, okay, so I've done two, and I'm going to put my hands up and say, look at that, it happens to the best of us. So do not despair if it happens to you. But in trying to straighten the stem, I knew I was pushing my luck a bit in trying to really over straighten this one, because what I tried to do here is pull the stem round to wrap it round the other way on the stick, and that can be a bit fatal. And there it is, I have split it. I tidied it all up, got it all ready to go. To pull it up straight, I just over straightened it. And it split off, and that can happen. So that's that one, that's gone. I mean, it could break. I mean, you could keep the plant if you wanted to, but I've got plenty of Robin Louises anyway. So that just shows you it can happen to the best of us. So do not despair if it happens to you. And this is always the reason why you sort of form, you know, a good say 3 or 4, because you will get the odd casualty, and there's one. So we'll put that one out the way. That one's gone. So we're left with 2, and these are the 2 that I've shown you. There's the first one. That's all neatly tidied up. Just needed a slight pull over. That's split quite readily. I've just stopped one of the sides. the other split side there that start forming the head. That starts forming their head will grow on a bit, and I didn't stop that because of that. Now the second one, which I explained, basically, you know, needed a bit more work. I've lowered it because the single top, which could ultimately have been used to really extend the actual sort of length of the stem before the head, it was all bloom and there was no decent breaks on it. You've got to think how in the future a head is going to form. These two are relatively straight, and I'm more than happy with the two that are left. So there we are. They're in 5-inch pots, and as I said, we over potted because we wanted lots of fleshy growth to grow on them. That has worked because I've had some huge leaves growing on this. I have fed them quite well, so they're growing quite fast. I will keep them in these pots now for probably a month or two to grow on for the rest of the summer. I will then think about putting them into a bigger pot as their final pot in probably September time, so that then they can really continue to grow for potentially being included in an exhibition show next year. They may be a bit young for that. I mean, these will be at their best in probably 2-3 years time onwards. I mean, I would hope to get a good number of years service out of these once their heads have formed. So in the meantime then, that's about it from me for now. I think I'm probably going to have a little bit of a break. The only next thing I'm going to do, which I will talk through, are all these zonal seedlings from taken from the plant Shrivenham Stars. Remember I showed you when I sowed them in early March. They're now just beginning to throw bud. They're growing on very quickly. So I've got buds just beginning to come. So I'll do another video when these begin to burst, which I think will be 2 to 3 weeks when these will start to come out. So it'll be really interesting. I had a count up yesterday. I've got 44 of them, I think, from various crosses. So it'll be interesting to see how they pan out. Bearing in mind, of course, with my Regals, how vastly different they can appear to the parent plant that they come from. So I look forward to seeing you again at some stage just in a few weeks' time. Goodbye for now.